But to begin with, a week in review with the provincial and municipal politics, and it's been quite a week already. And to that end, we're so pleased to welcome back to the program John Best, who is the publisher of the Bay Observer. John, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Hope you're going well these days.
Yeah, just great. Lovely day, Bill, and nice end to the week.
Let me delve quickly into the federal scene for just a second, because this was just hot off the presses as of yesterday. Early in the week, of course, the finance minister slash deputy PM, Chrystia Freeland, said, look, this inflation and conflation and everything else, it's a global problem, not much we can do about it. Yesterday, she was in front of the podium saying, well, yeah, here's what we're going to do about it. An $8.9 billion plan to help Canadians battered by inflation. And as you analyze it, and I know you probably already have done that, of course, most of these are just retreads of stuff that they had in the budget and some other stuff like that. But I guess there was an urgency because of everybody complaining about this to at least, give the perception that they're trying to get something done and do something different.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the cartoons that are, showing inflation as a kind of a monster and shoveling wheelbarrows full of money at it, which, is kind of counterintuitive. Spending money to fight inflation, but really it's pretty targeted, and I think the big piece is that your older old age pensioners are going to get about $700 a year extra. So if it's targeted to people who really are getting the brunt, everybody feels inflation, but we don't all feel it equally. It's a function of how much income you have. So giving extra money, I think, to pensioners is a sensible thing, especially since we had an announcement. I was listening to your news earlier about this big hike that we're going to get in fuel costs for home heating, natural gas. So, the reality is the inflation is being experienced around the world, and governments, individual governments, especially in a smaller country like Canada, there's not much we can do. Nobody wants to admit that, so they have to look like they're doing something.
Let's we'll follow that story, of course, as it develops over the next couple of days, I'm sure, because inflation's not going away anytime soon. That was the underscored message, I think, that we had to go into. Quickly into Ontario politics. Election night, of course, both Stephen Del Duca and Andrea Horwath announced they were stepping down as leaders of their respective parties. And the whispers have already started around Queen's Park, of course, about who may want those jobs. The Liberals may be a little more difficult. There's not too many people in their caucus to choose from. The NDP, I know Wayne Gates from Niagara Falls, the NDP member from down there, has announced his intentions, not officially, but just that he's going to be doing this. There's a few other people kicking the can too. From where do they get these leaders? And is there a call not just for a new leaderhood job, but maybe a new direction for these parties to try to catch the public's attention?
Well, yes, but I'm not sure that the willingness is there in the NDP for a change in direction. It's always been a party that, to some degree, put its ideology ahead of electoral success. That's changed somewhat, but I don't see a push in the NDP for trying to move to the center. That's something the Liberals should be thinking about doing, but no, I think they will stick largely to where they are, and hope that as they have. I was just looking at the last 10 elections in Ontario. If you take out the one where Bob Rae took them to victory, 74 seats, they average just over 19 seats per election for the last 10 elections. And that's kind of where you are. If you're NDP, you're looking at somewhere around 20 seats. And somewhere around 20% of the popular vote. That's sort of the normalcy for that party. And it's worked for years in the sense that you haven't seen major ideological revolts, nothing since the 60s, really, where there was a disruption within the party over what direction they were going in. So I think it's business as usual. People that support the NDP do for a very specific policy and ideological reason. I don't see it changing significantly in the hopes of gaining power.
Well, especially since, I mean, if you even want to go back to the last couple of federal elections, the NDP tend to want to punish leaders who try to bring them into the middle. Which maintains, I guess, your line of thinking that ideology is very important to them. Tom Mulcair got dumped pretty quickly. He thought he was going to be the prime minister in waiting as that election was called, and it didn't work out well for him. They went to a policy convention. What was over a month later, and they dumped him. Andrea Horvath was accused by some members, according to some of our sources at Queen's Park, for trying to move the party to the middle. I didn't really see that, but that's the way they felt about it. So it just seems as if they want to stick to that dogma, and that's going to be it. But that's for them to decide. What about the Liberals? Del Duca got one kick at the can, and that was it. I don't know what's going to happen now. Technically, they don't even have to pick a member from their own caucus. I mean, anybody, as an interim leader, certainly they do, but anybody can run for the leadership if they want to. And in the past, we've had people step down from federal jobs to run. Bob Ray, that you just mentioned, did that, of course. He was an MP for the Ottawa area and stepped down to run for the Ontario NDP and eventually became the premier. Is that the likely route that's going to have to be taken here?
Well, I think there's going to be a temptation for someone that's in that very diminished caucus to run, because clearly Stephen Del Duca was at a tremendous disadvantage in not being able to participate in question period during the last 4 years. He was, and he had a tough job roaming around the province. I think he was actually in a minivan. Really trying to raise money, trying to meet with some pretty bedraggled riding associations. A very, very, very thankless job. But he was not in the House, and so his profile was low, and then he had to kind of very quickly introduce himself to the Ontario public in the election campaign. I suspect there's going to be a temptation to not repeat that. Unless it's just a superstar coming in from the outside. I think they're probably going to have to look at their caucus and try to pick somebody that can get on their feet immediately after the convention and start firing away at the current government. I'm not privy to their internal thinking, so maybe that's my thinking, but they certainly were handicapped over the last 4 years not having their leader in the House.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, one name that's been thrown around, of course, is Mitzi Hunter, the MPP for the GTA area. But again, she's going to get the same stuff thrown out of the Del Duca did. She's a Kathleen Wynne, that sort of stuff, yada, yada, yada. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but they're going to have a lot of time for that to figure out. Very quickly, I want to move back into the municipal politics. And I guess to the surprise of no one, or maybe a few people anyway, former Hamilton Mayor Bob Bratina has announced that he wants the job once again and made it official earlier this week. He was on our show just a couple of days ago talking about that. The criticism about Bob coming back into this thing is, well, you've heard it as well, John, that, he's had his shot. It's time for somebody else. They want younger ideas, fresher ideas, and this is a retread. I mean, they say the same thing about Fred Eisenberger, who, by the way, is going to make his announcement on Monday, we're told. Where are we with this? I know it's only one vote on council, but the mayor's the mayor, and she is the leader of council, and it's a pretty important job. Keenan Loomis, of course, has already announced. He's the former head of the Chamber of Commerce here in the Hamilton area. There's a lot to choose, and boy, you can't look at this list of candidates even so far and say, well, they're all the same, because they aren't.
No, they aren't, and some of the stuff they've been throwing at Bratina, and it was interesting. I saw that Ryan McGreal, who certainly would not be listed as a Bratina fan under normal circumstances, he wrote an article where he said he was concerned about the ageism that's being shown towards Bratina. Now he went on to say there's a whole bunch of other reasons why he would disagree with him, but. I don't think that's going to fly. We live in a part of the world in southern Ontario where everybody respected a mayor nearby that was nearly 100 years old at the time she was mayor, and was still very effective. He's in good shape. He's been getting around town for really ever since he came back from Ottawa. and he's getting a lot of encouragement. So if it's because he's an older person, I think that's going to fall on its face, frankly. We'll see where this, we know we're in for kind of an ideological war here in the upcoming election. And at the end of the day, I think what people are looking for in the wake of all the controversy we've had with various, we've got this Red Hill inquiry going on right now. Frankly, I don't see a lot of council involvement at the end of the day in that issue. But all these so-called scandals, I think there's a mood for good government, to use an old phrase. So I think people are looking for a little bit of stability. And if we look at this provincial election, there seemed to be kind of a pushback against, Doug Ford, who is a blue-collar, hard hat kind of a guy, did very, very well. And that may be pointing to where people are municipally as well, that they're really not interested in maybe a lot of experimentation and that sort of thing. And the other point is the mayor is only one vote, and whoever becomes the mayor, their job is going to be to work with this council, which is going to have new faces. It's going to have 4 new faces, but at a minimum. And so I think I think the real challenge is going to be A, working with council, but B, restoring confidence in our municipal government. Bob Bertina talked about that, but I mean, we've been hearing that really all year from different groups that, the real issue is competency of government, and whoever can put the best argument that they're the one that can do it, I think is going to win in the fall.
Another former Hamilton Mayor, Larry Deaney, has weighed in on this. I don't know if you saw his tweet earlier this week, expressing some concern that this Hamilton Council is leaning a little too far to the left in many people's minds, and that could be problematic. And I know there's no party politics in municipal politics, but yeah, there is, by ideology, etc. And there's a concern that maybe that's one of the things that's holding them up from government assistance, economic development, all these sorts of things. He listed a few things that, not a new theory, but how do you assess that?
I tend to agree with him, quite frankly. I think not so much the current council, but this idea that we can replace, the idea of just throwing everybody out because they're incumbents, and long-time incumbents, that's a pretty shallow view of things. It's quite possible to be in office for a long time, and partly because you've maybe done a good job representing your constituents and looking after their needs. At the municipal level, people are really focused on bread and butter stuff. This CAA study this week that shows Barton Street to be the worst street in Ontario. That's kind of emblematic of, okay, what are we doing about our infrastructure deficit? People expect municipal governments not to preach to them. They expect their municipal government to manage garbage collection, transit, fire, police. It's really a bread and butter portfolio. If you want to be ideological, run for Parliament, because there nobody cares. You can talk about Palestine or whatever you want to do, but at the local level, you really got to focus on these bread and butter issues. And again, I think the person that looks like they've got that in their head is going to probably do very well in the fall.
Well, we got to leave it there. We're just about out of time, but I agree with your assessment that you don't use a person's age against them, and you don't use their tenure on council against them. It's their effectiveness, because there are some people there that haven't been there very long at all that I don't think are very effective. And you don't need to be young to have new ideas and fresh ideas. As you say, Hazel McCallion did a pretty decent job in Mississauga for a long, long time. So long way to go before we get to voting day. And as I say, we'll find out about Fred Eisenberger's path to whatever is going to be happening, I guess, on Monday when he makes his announcement. John, as always, thanks for all this. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
My pleasure, Bill.